So let's take a little tour around the wood and metal shop here at Spalding University, and I'll show you the tools that you have at your disposal. First off, we have our table saw. It's a 10-inch professional grade saw stop table saw. Works great. I'm going to make a few more videos about how you can use it, but please don't ever use the table saw without first watching those videos and going through training. You should always use the table saw with a partner, and for the first few times that you use it, I'm your partner. Here we have the 16-inch jet planer. This takes the rough edge and rough surface off of boards that have come from the mill and do not have a finished surface to them. This is our 14-inch Shop Fox bandsaw. It's a great tool. It's very useful for doing scroll cuts as long as they're not too tight of curves. If you do need to make curves that are very close and tight, you'll probably want to use the scroll saw, which I'll show you in a moment. Here we have two power sanders. We have the jet combination belt sander disc grinder, and we have the jet benchtop oscillating spindle sander. Both of these and all the rest of the tools that I'm going to show you will get their own orientation videos. Here we have our jet vacuum system for the shop. This pulls sawdust and wood chips from all of the tools that are hooked up to it in the upper part of the shop. There is one saw in the lower part of the shop that has its own separate vacuum system, which is actually our old vacuum. Now, the on-off switch for this vacuum and for the vacuum in the lower shop is in an unfortunate location. You have to kind of bend down and put your hand down around in the corner to find it. But I will show you the first time you're in the shop. It's back here. Way down in there. And here, next to it, we have our Shop Fox drill press. Drill press seems like a simple tool, but this one has a lot of adjustments and ins and outs, and it even has this funny little safety guide. So please, again, do not operate this tool without first going through orientation and talking to me. Here we have the Grizzly knife blade sander buffer. This is a combination of a buffing wheel or polishing wheel and a very small belt sander. And mainly this is for putting a fine finish on metal, particularly on knife blades and things like that. Here we have our Bosch sliding miter saw. Again, this is a bit more complicated version of a saw that you might be familiar with. What is special about this saw is that it has a very deep cut, because not only does it cut down, but it also pulls across. Here we have our Delta scroll saw. This is for doing finer work, finer detail work. If you need to cut something that has lots of curves, it will cut thin wood. It will also cut plexiglass and very fine metal. Here we have our Craig track saw and corresponding work table. This is excellent for making long cross cuts and also for cutting things in strange shapes. It's a plunge saw. It works a lot like a circular saw, and I'll show you more about it in a later video. Here we have our jet closed stand wood shaper. You can think of this as basically a router that's mounted in a cabinet with a work table on top. It does most of the same things that a router would do, such as putting a profile on the edge of a piece of wood. It's also very useful for cabinet joinery if you want to join two pieces of wood together that have a style or a profile around them. Here we have our Shop Fox variable speed wood lathe and a little work cart that has a mallet and some chisels on it that you would need to turn something on the lathe. Here in the upper shop, the wood shop, you will notice this big cabinet next to the sink. This cabinet holds a lot of the hand tools that you'll need when you're working here in the shop. It also holds much of our hardware, sanding belts, clamps, things like that. If you ever get anything out of this, make sure that when you're done, you put it back where you found it. And if you forget for some reason, please come and talk to me or a student assistant, and they will help. Next to the cabinet here, we have the battery chargers for the small rechargeable drills. This area of the shop, behind the 3 big toolboxes, is off limits to anyone except faculty and possibly a student assistant. This is where I keep a lot of the finer tools, some of the spare blades and spare parts, and manuals for the tools. We also have our Tormek knife sharpener behind me here. If you think you need something out of this area of the shop, come and talk to me, but please do not come back here and start opening drawers and looking for things. This workbench here, next to the 3 toolboxes, has some of the things that you will need in the shop. There are safety glasses, respirators, dust masks, gloves. There are even knee pads and tool belts should you need them. This is also where you would probably do gluing and clamping or using the air nailer, as the air hose is right there. We have 3 main work tables here in the upper wood shop. Each of them has a different kind of work vise on it and a storage shelf underneath. Please, if you store something in the shop, talk to me first. Keep all of your stuff together, and it's best to put your name on it somehow, even if that's just slipping a piece of paper between 2 blocks of wood, so that we all know whose is whose and that your materials don't get used or reprocessed back into what the shop already has. This work table that you see behind me here has a bunch of holes in the top. This is called a parf table. There are special little plastic inserts called dogs, parf dogs, and you can use those to brace a piece of wood, clamp it in position so that it doesn't slide around when you're working on it. We're down in the lower shop now. Most of the lower shop is metal tools. However, there is one tool down here that's useful for wood, and that is the miter saw. This is a bit smaller miter saw than the one upstairs, but it has this great rail and table system around it. I find this saw very useful for cutting picture frames and doing fine mitering. Now, this saw has its own vacuum right there, which is the old vacuum from the shop. The only thing attached to that vacuum is this miter saw. So, the only time you need to turn that vacuum on down here in the lower shop is when you're using this small miter saw. Back here in the corner next to the lower shop vacuum is also the air compressor. Generally, I handle dealing with the air compressor, turning it on and turning it off. You shouldn't need to do anything here at this point. If it's not on, come and talk to me and I will switch it on. However, there is a regulator down a little ways that you may end up having to adjust. I'll show you that now. Behind me here you can see our sandblasting unit. This is for doing a little bit of fine finishing on metal work and other things. You can distress wood with it, plastic, things like that. It's a fun tool. Talk to me before you use it. It can be a little strange at first. Behind it here, we have the regulator for the airline, and you can see the iron pipe here that goes over to the air compressor that I showed you a moment ago. Now, this regulator is what you would use to adjust the air, right there, to adjust the air for, say, the air nailer or the plasma cutter or even the little spray nozzle if you're trying to clean something off. First time you go to use it, come talk to me. I'll show you how it works. Beyond that, once you've used it a few times, I trust you to adjust the air in the regulator. Mounted to this work table here, you see 2 of our metal shears. We have the 8-inch bench shear and the 4-inch throatless shear here on the table. Both of them have a maximum thickness that is clearly labeled on the handle of the shear, and there's a thickness gauge hanging right on the wall by the shears. If you can't find this little thickness gauge, come talk to me. Don't just guess what thickness your metal is. We wouldn't want to put metal through these that was too thick for them. It could damage the blade and then no one else could use it. Here you see our Eastwood manual iron worker. Look how big the handle is on this tool. The reason that it has such a large handle is it's made to cut through steel, very thick steel actually. It'll cut square stock, round stock, T-bars, angle iron, and flat steel. And again, the maximum thickness is clearly noted on the machine. Here we have the Eastwood combination break and slip roll shear. This machine will cut steel, it will put a corner on it or an angle, and it'll also put a roll to thinner steel. Slip roll is up here under the cover. You can remove some of the little plates in the break part of it to make boxes. This is our Langmuir CNC plasma cutter. It is a computer-driven plasma cutter. You can design a part in the computer, bring it in here, you have a dedicated laptop, and the machine will cut out the part for you. Here we have our English wheel. This is for working steel into round shapes. You can make a suit of armor on this thing. Here we have our combination shrinker stretcher. Has a foot pedal, does up to 16 gauge steel. You might notice down here in the lower shop we have a second drill press. So this is our old drill press that we have dedicated to using specifically for steel. On the column behind we have some drill bits that you can use to cut through steel. The same as any other drill bit. The difference is you use a little bit of oil or cutting fluid, and the drill press is actually geared a little bit slower, which helps when cutting through steel. Behind me here you have our two floor mounted bench grinders. We have a 6-inch and an 8-inch model. The 6-inch model has a wire brush attached. Here we have another manual steel bender. It has a variety of rollers and a big handle, and it is mounted to the floor so that you can put some force on it without it moving around while you're working. Just like up in the upper shop, down here in the metal shop, we have a couple of tool cabinets that hold some of our smaller tools. First, we have this wooden cabinet behind me that holds our angle grinders. We also have this large stand-up toolbox that holds our welding gloves, slag hammer for the welder, and other different bits and pieces that we need down here in the metal shop. Please, again, everything is clearly labeled. If you use something out of one of these cabinets, please put it back where it goes, and if you can't figure out where it goes, then come and talk to me and I'll help you to learn where you should put it. Here we have 3 different options for cutting steel that might be too thick to use in one of the shears. We have the metal bandsaw, and then we have 2 abrasive cutoff saws. Now, the cutoff saws throw a lot of sparks, and they're very loud, but they do their job, and they're not terribly dangerous, provided you keep your hand away from the blade, just like anything else here in the shop. Back here in the metalworking booth, we have several kinds of welders and other metalworking equipment. First, we have our Miller arc welder. We have the Miller-Matic MIG welder, that's an auto feed spool. And then we have our manual plasma cutter. And over here, for my other shoulder, we have our oxyacetylene unit. This can be used to cut and also braze steel. Last but not least, we have our anvil. What would a metal shop be without a nice sturdy anvil? I bet you only saw one of these in a Warner Brothers cartoon falling on Wile E. Coyote's head. Another resource that I'd like to show you that is in conjunction with the wood and metal shop is what I call the free source. It's just down the hall in a little old office, and it's a place where we collect all unused and unwanted materials to be recycled and repurposed. If you have anything that you think might be useful for the resource, again, contact me, Sean Hennessy, shennessy @spalding.edu. This is a resource that's mostly used by art students, but anybody doing a project down here could come and take a look around. Everything is free, and all we ask is that you sign in and make a note of what you took. Gathering all these materials together in the free source allows us to lower student cost. Now, when students need to do an introductory project, they don't have to go out and buy cardboard or styrofoam or other things. And if any students leave behind materials, we can bring them here to the free source and someone else will get a chance to use them. Any enrolled student, faculty, or staff can come and use the Spalding Wood and Metal Shop. Please keep in mind that some classes do have dedicated time slots here in the shop. So please check the shop hours to make sure that the time is available where you can work. And plan to go through orientation and safety training before you start any projects. Thanks for taking the tour of the Spalding Wood and Metal Shop. My name is Sean Hennessy, and I hope to see you in here working sometime.